Welcome to the Flynn Brothers Podcast. I'm John.
And I'm Jimmy. Today's big idea, the best movie year of the century, Part 4.
We discuss the movies of the 2020s, broken down year by year into three categories: acclaimed, popular, and Flynn Brother favorites.
Later, we dole out some trophies at the first annual Willie Awards before battling in a tournament to determine the best movie year of the 21st century.
Finally, this is part 4 of a 4-part podcast. If you haven't already, listen to parts 1, 2, and 3, and be sure to tune in next week where we'll be talking about something other than movies. We promise.
It's all coming up. But first, here's the Solons.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, the home stretch. Best movie year of the century, Part 4. To review really quickly our categories that we're going through for each year. We're talking about acclaimed films, popular films, and Flynn Brothers favorites. And please, if you think we forgot any movies, you can always write us an angry email at flynnbrospod@gmail.com. And we encourage you to follow along at home on IMDb and Wikipedia. And reminder, we are on a quest to see if there's a better movie year than 2019. So we'll come through each year to see if there are any worthy movie years to take on 2019 at the end of the pod. And we'll be doling out some awards as well. Did I forget anything?
I don't think you did. I'm super excited.
Fabulous. Let's go to the first year of the 2020s. 2020, our acclaimed films. We have Nomadland, which won Best Picture. I feel like this is a movie that sort of like someone living van life has kind of just gone away with the breeze. It doesn't feel like it's had a lot of lasting power.
No, I haven't heard really anybody talk about it, but Frances McDormand is a fantastic actor.
Yeah, she was on a good run during this time, which we'll touch on later. I really enjoyed Judas and the Black Messiah. The two-hander of Lakeith Stanfield and Daniel Kaluuya I thought was really awesome. There were kind of some Scorsese-inspired elements, and they're really two actors who pretty much when they're in something, I'm down to see it. I think, along with kind of Jesse Plemons, who's also in the movie, they're sort of that under 40 or around 40 kind of up-and-coming generation of actors who I'm always very, very excited when they're in something.
Extremely complimentary in this movie, too, because I think Kaluuya has the magnetism that you need to pull off the lead character. Lakeith really plays this split personality guy who's living in two worlds, living undercover, and then Plemons is so good as, the banality of evil. Right. This expressionless man just looking at you, making sure you do what you do. Also, that Lil Rel Howery cameo.
Oh, yeah, he's like a pimp or something.
Yeah, he's pretending to be a pimp, but it's a drama. Yeah, so just a really fascinating movie, especially about a time period of history that you don't really learn about in school unless you're in college taking a pretty advanced class.
Mank, our next acclaimed film. This was kind of an odd one. David Fincher directed this. I believe it was based on a script written by his father. So it's obviously a very personal film to him. And it's about Herman Mankiewicz, who was the co-writer of Citizen Kane along with Orson Welles and was believed to have written most of the film. But Fincher chooses to shoot the movie in black and white, but he shoots it digitally. And the movie has just a very odd look to it. There's also a lot of exterior scenes. And I feel like too much sunlight is let in, and just the look of the film isn't your traditional, mid 20th century noir sort of black and white look to it. It just feels very washed out, and it just is. I understand the choice to shoot in black and white, but might have been the wrong choice.
I agree. I think part of it is that you are in these really grand, spectacular places. The Hearst Manor, right?
Yeah, Hearst Castle.
Hearst Castle, which is a beautiful building. It should be sort of rendered fully in color. I think it would really get across the splendor, and there's also this Hollywood of yesteryear. But I think the main thing that sums up why the black and white was a weird choice is there is a zoo at Hearst Castle, right. And there is a CGI giraffe in black and white, and I think that is just what are we doing here?
A little uncanny valley, a little odd, right? A little odd, definitely. Another acclaimed film, Promising Young Woman. There was also Minari, Sound of Metal, and The Trial of the Chicago 7. I gotta be honest, I didn't see any of the last four films, and part of the reason was during 2020, I felt it was just really hard to get excited for new movies during the time. So much you're already caught indoors and just watching TV and consuming media all the time. And these were just movies that, I've heard good things about all of them, but for some reason, just at the time, I just had no zhuzh. I had no zest to see these movies, and yeah, just since then I haven't gone back and watched any of them. Have you seen any of these? Do you think?
No, I think they were all a little bit perhaps promising to be challenging a little, and you just didn't really want to be challenged at all during
agree.
COVID. I just really sort of remember watching a lot of Iron Chef America and like, cooking competitions. The repair shop where they go to Britain and they repair old antiques, make them look new. That was the sort of content I was craving. That
was what we were enjoying. There was Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which I really enjoyed. There's a really strong Viola Davis performance. It's based on an August Wilson play, I believe. The one odd thing about the film is Viola Davis plays Ma Rainey, but from my memory, she's not in the movie a ton. Do you kind of remember that?
Yeah, it's sort of more of a Chadwick Boseman playing a jazz cat.
And I think he got a posthumous, he died around the time the movie came out, and he got a posthumous nomination. His work's very good in it, but I think it's a little stronger even in Da Five Bloods, which we'll talk about later. We were teasing that in the last episode, too. Boy, we were.
We
better live up to it. But perhaps one of my favorite films, our last acclaimed film from 2020, Another Round. This was a film from Denmark by Thomas Vinterberg, and Mads Mikkelsen is absolutely brilliant. He's the main character in this movie. Can you give the audience a quick little summary of Another Round?
For
middle-aged
Danish teachers discover a professor has written a paper arguing that humans should live at 0.08 alcohol blood percentage, and
basically you should be always a glass of wine deep, right?
Yeah. And so they test this out with their students, and at first it goes well.
Yeah,
but then
it doesn't, as it goes with drinking. But yeah, they're all these kind of middle-aged guys who are having problems with their wives. They're having problems at school, getting through to their students, and they kind of see this as a way to zhuzh up their life. Look at me using that word again. And for some of the guys it goes well. One of the guys, as you can imagine, gets pretty hooked on alcohol. Alcohol can sometimes have addictive effects, I've heard.
It can do that. It is a warning, certainly.
And but overall, it's just an incredible movie, an incredible examination of drinking culture, specifically, Danish drinking culture and humanity's relationship to alcohol, how we use it when we celebrate, how we use it when we're depressed. And Mads Mikkelsen, though, it is just movie star performance.
Absolutely. There's a scene very early on where he's sort of saying, no, guys, I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to drink. And they're all out to dinner. And then he does finally break down and order a martini.
No, I think it's they're having like a very fancy vodka, and he takes a sip of the vodka and just Anyway, go ahead.
Just the way he drinks it, you can just feel how much he has missed this, how much he wants this.
Yeah.
There's a score of other great scenes in the movie. Mads Mikkelsen teaching, and there's like some fairly realistic teaching scenes. There's a scene where the four guys are just getting drunk and dancing together, which is hilarious. And then the ending is fantastic. As a little hint, Mads Mikkelsen's character is an ex-jazz dancer.
Yes, and
that factors heavily.
Comes to fruition. All right, let's move on to the popular category. We have Christopher Nolan's Tenet. Now, this was a movie that is spelled the same forwards as backwards. What's the word for that?
Palindrome?
Palindrome.
That's what I want to say.
That's right.
Palindrome should be a palindrome. They
It
should have made up a word.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Tenet, I remember us watching this, and I've only seen it once, and of course was absolutely baffled by it. You've seen it, I think, 2 or 3 times, and I remember you kind of enjoying it on your second or third viewing. What do you like so much about Tenet?
Well, I think the main greatness of it is Christopher Nolan with Robert Pattinson and John David Washington in an action movie about spies in the future.
Good meat and potatoes.
Yeah, once you sort of wrap your arms around that, you're like, okay, look, I'm not going to maybe understand everything that happens, but there's going to be some stuff going backwards and forward motion. It will sort of click, but I would say the main thing is you don't have to think too hard about it. I would argue it's one of the Nolan movies where, maybe he's overthinking it by half, but overall, it's just pretty enjoyable, and there's some pretty sweet action sequences that dominate the movie, and just it seems like Nolan really was excited about the idea of things running in reverse and then redoing them in regular motion, and that really, I think, is the shining moment of this film.
Worth a revisit, you're telling me?
Yeah, I think every few years you should throw it on, and maybe you'll be a little disappointed by it, but I think Robert Pattinson, he's in a really kind of interesting sort of role for him, a little bit more subdued, and then John David Washington is, he's Denzel's son, and he carries it over quite well.
Another popular film, Bad Boys for Life, probably the, fourth movie in the Bad Boys franchise. The only reason I put it was the highest grossing American movie of the year. It just shows that 2020, the COVID year, was such a weird year. I think it only, it only made about $500 million, which comparatively for a box office number one is pretty low in this modern day and age. But
must have been big in Florida.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, people were going out, getting haircuts, going on cruises, watching Bad Boys for Life in the theater. Another popular film, Sonic the Hedgehog. Famously, they redesigned the Sonic character at the 11th hour, and they just put out the third one, and it's pretty darn successful. So good call. Sometimes the internet can bully people into doing good things.
Frankly, I would say it rarely happens, but in this case, it was correct. Sonic looked real freaky.
Final popular film, Soul, the Pixar movie Soul. Really good movie. Very much flew under the radar. I remember watching it just on streaming. Tina Fey has a good performance as kind of this puckish side character. And Jamie Foxx, I think, is the lead voice. And,
it felt like sort of a return to what I remember Pixar feeling like when I was a kid. Like just this very winsome, heartwarming story that also had a bit of an edge to
very
it.
adult film in terms of its approach to death.
Yeah.
There's a pretty big twist in the first third of the film where the character dies. I gave it away, sorry, but there's going to be some spoilers. What can I say?
But yeah, I remember the conception of death it's these souls riding an escalator into this white rectangle, and then they're just obliterated, which I think is interesting, especially if like you're trying to make a movie about death and you don't really want to go into any specific religion. I thought that they did a good job of kind of imbuing it with the depth, though, that you would get from that type of a take on something.
All right, moving on to the Flynn brothers' favorites. We've arrived. Da Five Bloods. I think it's one of Spike Lee's best movies. At the top, you have Do the Right Thing. I think Malcolm X is right up there. He's got some really great movies, but I really, really love this movie. One of the reasons I love it is Delroy Lindo's performance as this crazed, still caught in Vietnam guy. For those who haven't seen it, it's about these four African-American soldiers who served in Vietnam, and then they come back years later to go basically on a treasure hunt. And, Delroy Lindo's character kind of never left Vietnam. And there's some wonderful moments of humor. There's a scene where the four guys are like walking through a nightclub and they're all dancing. It's just like a classic Spike Lee moment. And, Jonathan Majors is really good. There's a really strong moment in this film where he steps, I think one of them steps on a landmine and they have to help him get off the landmine. It's absolutely breathless. There's a lot of experimentation, which is typical of Spike Lee, where, he's kind of messing with the aspect ratios, and he does some of the real life news footage. I don't know. I just really, at the time, it's a pretty dark movie, and I was a little nervous to watch it at the time, but I really, really loved this movie.
It hit. I think it just really kind of hits deep and feels a little bit more cohesive. Sometimes Spike Lee, I feel like, has so many ideas that he wants to get across that some of them, they do get across, but maybe they're not as fully formed as possible. Kind of what we compared this one to is the Black Klansman, which I think this one is just a little bit more enjoyable from my perspective. The other thing about Delroy Lindo's character was the first time that we saw a black MAGA guy, which is such a mind blower of a thing. And then, of course, we mentioned earlier, Chadwick Boseman is in it as this sort of departed brother of these four guys, and he gives these sort of flashback performances. It has that Irishman technique where they de-age the guys, which again I think works well in this, because when you remember yourself, you don't remember yourself as your age. You almost see a younger version of your current self.
And his tragic passing just lends the movie even more gravitas, that his character had passed away, and it just very, very powerful film. One of the, frankly, for my money, one of the best Vietnam movies, I would say.
Absolutely. You'd think that everything that could possibly be said about Vietnam in film had already been
40 years ago, you figured it was said, but no, Spike found new ground.
Yep.
Another Flynn Brothers favorite, Hubie Halloween. I believe we've in passing mentioned this, the great Adam Sandler Halloween film. It was kind of the first rock solid old school Sandler comedy I remember coming out. You know, his Netflix work had kind of been hit or miss up to that point, particularly the comedies. But this just felt like an old school Adam Sandler 90s comedy. It's really funny. There's the typical great casting. Kevin James has a good performance as a cop, and Julie Bowen, who was in Happy Gilmore as his love interest, in this. And there's the typical, you know, celebrity cameos and stunt casting, but he always gives his celebrity friends fun sort of roles to play. And I think Ray Liotta's in it as kind of a bit part. But yeah, man, it's just like every other Halloween, we throw it on, just puts a smile on our face.
He's just playing a super weird guy. Like, it's the classic Sam, I'm just going to play a weird guy. Outrageous that it is the follow-up to Uncut Gems for him. I mean, no other actor has that range. And yeah, it's just way funnier than it has any right to be. Like, you're laughing pretty consistently throughout the whole film.
That's wonderful. Last Flynn Brothers favorite, Borat's subsequent movie film. So this was the sequel to Borat. Borat, of course, one of the all-time great iconic comedies, totally lives up. And, you know, everyone was pretty nervous, tugging their collar when it was announced that a sequel was coming out, but it's a very timely film. It's a lot about 2020 and COVID and Trump and just a lot of the stuff going on at that time. But it's a surprisingly emotional film. It's not as funny as the first one. It's still very, very funny. I think there's a prank at the end where he, you know, kind of goes undercover. He has to basically go undercover most of the movie because everyone recognizes Borat. So the concession is, oh, Borat is going undercover. But like, I think he goes to like, you know, a Trump rally or something and like gets a gun pointed on him, and just Sacha Baron Cohen is just so gutsy, and you know, there's a real edge to the movie. But the female character, I think it's Maria Bakalova, who was kind of the first time performer in that film. She's really good, and there's a very emotional scene where she's talking about sort of how men in her life have treated her, how Borat treats her, and there's this other woman who she's talking to in a car who's basically giving her advice to, you know, kind of stand up for yourself and imbues her with some self-confidence. And yeah, it's just not what you expect from a Borat movie.
Not at all. The pranks almost reveal this deeper humanity. Obviously, Borat famously is virulently anti-Semitic, and goes into a synagogue and is doing every single thing that you could think of to offend a person. And it's this old Jewish woman who's just basically like, I'm not a monster. I'm not who you say I am. Like, touch me. Like, see who I am. I'm a human being just like you. Yeah. And you're just like blown away by how kind people are being to this ridiculous and frankly cruel man.
And it's just so interesting when both films came out, because the first Borat, there was perhaps a national ignorance of the ugly sides of our country that Borat exposed. Whereas now, and it was kind of funny, but whereas now people kind of knew about the ugliness and it was exposed, but then people, you know, instead of laughter being kind of the effect, it was more like emotionality and sympathy and empathy, and just very interesting when both films came out.
It's true, because he kind of embeds with some real Trump guys and some real like COVID deniers, and he's like living in their log cabin for a significant period.
It's a dice roll. And then of course the twist ending is Borat's the guy who started COVID. 2020, you know, hampered by COVID, you know, comparatively to some of these other years, I think it's a bit of a weak year, so I don't know that we can quite nominate this one to go against 2019.
No, but certainly some really solid pictures, particularly Judas and the Black Messiah.
Absolutely. All right, moving on to 2021, the acclaimed films Coda. I think it stood for Children of Deaf Adults. Was that it? And that one, Best Picture. I enjoyed the film. We both enjoyed the film. We've never rewatched it, but you had sort of a issue with this film, particularly the ending that you sort of had with Lady Bird. Talk to me about sort of this issue you had.
And this may not be a popular take. It is all well and good to leave your hometown. My brother and I have. However, I am not inspired or moved by somebody leaving everyone and that loves them and where they are desperately needed to pursue a somewhat frivolous seeming dream. No offense to the people in Coda. The woman in Coda wants to be a singer, which is a beautiful thing to do. Absolutely beautiful. However, at the very moment that she wants to be a singer, her family is starting a fishing co-op, and she is desperately needed to translate. She is the only person, I think, in the world who can simultaneously deal with her family, talk to the fishermen, and make sure that everyone is getting along equitably and all of this sort of stuff.
Right.
And she leaves to study singing at the Berklee School of Music.
It's just a little odd how both these films frame it, where the protagonist must leave her loving family and beautiful hometown behind. She must, and it's
she
like
can't stand it.
Yeah, and it's like there is some inner conflict, and you understand that from a dramatic standpoint. But yeah, just when you kind of zoom out, it's just sort of an odd hill to die on.
I'd say it's
like.
just a little selfish, is how it leaves me feeling.
Yeah.
And I think if she had done the audition and she had learned that she was good enough, but then like the family's accepted that she's leaving, and whoa, here she is, she's back, she's going to help things for a little while or whatever, that would have maybe moved me a little more. I just don't think that that's really a perspective that people value in America. It's this individualistic.
The other side, I think, is people go to the movies to see people live out their dreams.
Yeah.
Like that's part of why you go to the movies. So I think perhaps there's that angle to it as well.
Yeah.
Other acclaimed films, we had Belfast, we had Don't Look Up, which was the Adam McKay political satire. Very good movie. I don't know that it's great. We talked about how Adam McKay can sometimes get in his own way with that twitchy cinema verite documentary style and the news footage and whatnot. And, we're such a big fan of his collaborations with Will Ferrell. And don't just sort of feel watching these last few Adam McKay movies, boy, be really great if Will Ferrell was in the movies. Or conversely, you watch a few of the last Will Ferrell movies, it's like, boy, be really great if Adam McKay was helping write and direct. Do you kind of feel that way?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I also think McKay, because of the award acclaim that he got, the cast is inflated too heavily.
Yeah.
Like Leo, we love him. God bless him. The last movie star left, But
Hold on, Timothy Chalamet has entered the chat.
That's true. Well, he is excellent in this movie. Leo, I actually, and it sells the big emotional moment, Chalamet, by saying a grace, which is unreal. But Leo, it's just like, I can't just help but see the guy who dates 25-year-olds and spends most of his time eating spaghetti and smoking cigarettes on yachts. Like, I actually, to your point about Will Ferrell, would have liked to see Will Ferrell in the Leo role.
Because Leo's playing basically the schlubby professor. And yeah, you and the movies, and Leo can do comedy very well, but no one can do comedy better than Will Ferrell. No. So it's there's this, I don't know, it's like this gap in Will Ferrell and Adam McKay's filmography where it's their early work together is just so good, and then their later work is good, but it doesn't have that same magic that they had together.
Yeah, they just had a great chemistry, a great shorthand, and the writing and acting fit hand in glove.
Yeah. Another acclaimed film, King Richard. I forgot who won the Oscar for that. There was also Power of the Dog, West Side Story. Oh, Licorice Pizza, wonderful Paul Thomas Anderson film. We've only seen it once. I think it's on our list to rewatch. All of his movies, you pretty much got to watch at least 2 or 3 times just to comprehend everything. And a movie that weirdly was like generating controversy when it came out, but it's all just internet BS. You watch the movie and it's like pretty tame and harmless and just really lovingly made.
Yeah, I think you're gonna have to take a pretty reductive view of it to be offended by it. I also think in terms of your lovingly made, it stars, the son of Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Cooper
Hoffman, a collaborator, Alana Haim, and that is the daughter of the music teacher of PTA when he was a kid who had a crush on. It's as close as something comes to like a passion project home movie almost. It's like starring people, the sons of people and daughters of people he knew, and it has this really like textured, worn in feel. Neither of those two leads have your classic Hollywood look, which just makes it feel all the more real. But they both are just fantastic in it, I think.
Completely agree. Another acclaimed film, Nightmare Alley. This was from Guillermo del Toro. This was a remake of a film with Tyrone Power that came out in the middle of the 20th century. How about that for research? I find this film insanely underrated. Our dad was the first one who watched it and told us to watch it. We weren't going to the theater a ton 2020, 2021, just with COVID and stuff. But I think we got it on home video. What do you call it? Streaming. Home video. Good God. And it's awesome, dude. It's a total masterclass from Bradley Cooper. I think it's arguably his best movie. It basically, he's this con man who works at a circus and then goes out in the world and meets his match as a con man with Cate Blanchett. And it's very dark. It's very funny. It's beautifully shot. Just a wonderful, wonderful movie.
I know this is going to surprise the listeners, but I completely agree.
Thanks, buddy.
I think Guillermo del Toro and the circus aesthetic around the turn of the century is just perfect fit. There's so many just strange, messed up things. I mean, we can't go without talking about the Dafoe geek relationship.
Yeah, we got to talk about the geek. So a geek in a circus is the freak, basically, and Dafoe plays this ringleader of the circus who tells Bradley Cooper how you get a guy to quote-unquote geek, and you basically have to find a very hard-up, alcohol-addicted, opium-addicted man, and you basically say you're going to hire him, and then you deprive him of alcohol and opium, then you give him alcohol and opium, and
you take it away.
And then you take it away, and you basically get him so desperate that he will debase himself for paying customers. And it's again, very Guillermo del Toro, very screwed up. There's a brilliant scene where Dafoe talks about this process, and then it all comes full circle in the end. And boy, just a wonderful film.
Fantastic.
We also had, under Acclaimed Films for 2021, The Tragedy of Macbeth. This was the Joel Coen solo effort away from his brother. And
don't get any ideas.
So yeah, some bros, they just can't get along, tragically. But it's a wonderful movie. Denzel, Frances McDormand, they're all great. I think it was all shot on sound stages, so the movie just has this incredible production design, shot in black and white. And another great performance is Catherine Hunter, who's kind of a well-known British actress, and she plays the three witches. And there's a scene where I can kind of do like contortionism, and she like contorts herself to portray all three witches. And it is one of the most brilliant performances I've ever seen in a supporting role.
Totally. Her voice is just, as soon as it sets the tone for the movie, that this is like not only elevated but strange and sort of spine tingling in comparison to Mank, which we derided for the black and white approach. This one I think really benefits from it. The lighting is so studied and all of the angles are fantastic. Denzel and Frances McDormand, I mean, are just really making a meal out of Shakespeare's
two
dialogue.
at the top of their game.
Absolutely.
Too. Like just they just were at the top of their game. Just total veteran actors.
Yeah.
Popular movies now. We got Dune. Or as I call it, grown-up Star Wars. You really enjoyed Dune. What do you love about Dune?
Well, I read the books. I think the movies are pretty good adaptations of the books. Certainly there's a lot more complexity in the books as there is in any sort of thing. But I think Chalamet, just again, like, I think if you're a young man, there's an inherent jealousy of Timothée Chalamet. He's just kind of got it all.
Yeah.
And you're just like, there's no way he's that good of an actor.
Right.
He's not going to be good in this also. And every time, he's great. He's incredible in this, especially in the part where he's sort of the Bene Gesserit comes to visit him the first time. Put your hand in the box. You're going to feel pain.
Right.
And it's literally... the only thing that sells it is Chalamet's reaction.
And
You've got a little
so-
sound, but other than that, it's all Chalamet.
Yeah.
And he goes from being this little spoiled boy to this sort of messiah in waiting by the end of the movie, and you just buy it. You buy it.
Wonderful world. Stellan Skarsgård, one of the all-time great villains, just a Jabba the Hutt-esque slob of a villain.
Yeah, you've
chilling in the black pool of whatever that gunk is. Yeah, he's wonderful.
Oil. Javier Bardem is really, just chewing the scenery.
Yeah.
You got Batista. You've got Josh Brolin. Is Momoa in it too?
I think Momoa's in it. Oscar Isaac's wonderful.
I mean, it's just loaded. Loaded.
We'd be
all the
remiss
favorites.
if we didn't say Zendaya's also.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Get those clicks up. We mentioned her. All right, another popular film, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. And then we had the final Daniel Craig Bond film, No Time to Die. Spoiler alert, there is time to die. Bond dies at the end. Yeah, I don't know. Did you see that coming, Bond dying at the end of this movie?
I think he's trying to essentially kill himself with all of these missions he's going on. It doesn't really seem to love being alive, James Bond, all that much. So it seems a fitting send-off.
The only things he has to live for are shaken, not stirred martinis, married women, and the occasional fist fight.
The glory of the British crown, I guess.
All right, Flynn Brothers favorites. We got, Zack Snyder's Justice League. Believe it. We hate ourselves for liking this movie, but yeah, man, as someone who saw Justice League in theaters, the Joss Whedon kind of recut version, and it was one of the worst films I've ever seen, I was like, all right, let's see. There was so much hype over it. We threw it on. It's 3.5 hours. The last half hour in the rubbish bin. You don't need to watch the last half hour. I will say, though, man, I did enjoy it. Like, I think we've watched it a second time, and you get his vision. You have to buy into his style. You have to buy into the slow-mo. You have to buy into the dark visual style, all that stuff. You have to buy into ripped Ben Affleck Batman, all this stuff. But it really is a pretty good comic book movie.
Seriously is, and the reason is he takes it so seriously.
Yes.
I think that with these comic book movies, the stakes are often the fate of the world.
Right.
And he does actually a really good job of making that feel tangible. There's the time where the aliens show up and the Amazons are protecting some cube. This stuff doesn't really matter, whatever the plot devices are. Right. But there's this moment where the Amazons are just fighting the heck out of this guy. And they're really fighting him. They're really fighting him. But then they lose and they all die. And usually in these movies, when you have this much of a set piece, and particularly, in the modern era, you don't really see, you're sort of conditioned as a modern audience. It's like, oh, these female characters, the studio isn't going to have them lose. They don't want to make them to look weak, these Amazons. Right. And I think by doing that, it only intensifies the power and the sacrifice that they do. So he makes a lot of kind of bold, maybe countercultural choices. You can see why a studio shelved this movie, no question. But if you're a certain type of man, you'll probably like it.
Ray Fisher, who plays, I believe the character is Cyborg. He has an extended sequence of his origin story, and that's a pretty stirring sequence. And I remember the actor being pretty upset when they, Joss Whedon and, the producers, when the first Justice League version came out, kind of cut him out of the movie. And you see why he was upset, because you go back and watch the Snyder version, and it's really wonderful. It's a really stirring sequence.
Yeah, the moment I remember, just the last thing, he really sells what it's like to fly.
Yes.
There's a moment where he gets in his suit or whatever, his cyborg army or outfit, and he's zooming in the sky, and it's a little tiny grin, but it's like that the movie really lands those small moments.
All right, female listeners, you can go ahead and unmute. We stopped talking about Zack Snyder's Justice League. Another Flynn brother favorite, we had Bad Trip, which was the Eric Andre prank movie. It's insanely funny, man. I think next to Sacha Baron Cohen, Johnny Knoxville, Eric Andre is the gutsiest comedian. He will really put himself in compromised, dangerous situations for a laugh, a really cathartic laugh. And this was just a slam dunk, hilarious movie. Great work from Tiffany Haddish. We loved it.
Tiffany Haddish is hand in glove in this role. I mean, it's just because her superpower, I think, is just her personality and herself. You just want to turn her loose and see what's going to happen. Eric Andre, similar to Borat's subsequent movie film, does also reveal a lot of the goodness in people with his pranks. I think is really interesting. This one, though, is the biggest casualty, I think, of COVID shutting down movie theaters. This would have been such a fun movie to watch with a theater full of people.
100% agree. Last Flynn brother favorite, Shiva Baby. This was a sweet little movie. It's very small, very intimate, kind of an indie comedy, but I think it's Rachel Sennott. Is that the Sennott, something like that, the lead actress? But yeah, very, very good movie. It's only about 75, 80 minutes, but a wonderful film.
Yeah, she's a sugar baby who's going to a Shiva, and the man for whom she is a sugar baby has his wife there, and the wife is pregnant.
Do they already have a baby as well? They might already have a baby.
They might already have a baby. It's it's a lot of tension, a lot of just great Jewish humor as well, absolutely. Just really getting into some deep stuff that I wasn't aware tradition wise.
Yeah.
So yeah,
wonderful. 2021, solid year. I think still feeling the effects of COVID. I don't know if it's going to hold a candle to 2019, so I don't know if we can nominate it.
No, I can't get it there.
All right, moving on. 2022, the acclaimed films, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, won Best Picture. Really blew my mind when I first saw this movie, but I got to say, all this time later, I don't have a super strong desire to return to it. I'm sure it's very rewatchable. It was very funny, very action-packed, very emotional when I saw it. But for me, it just feels so of the moment. What do you think?
I think it's the pinnacle of the multiverse trend.
Yeah.
I think it did it the best out of any of them, largely because it isn't just a straight up superhero movie. There are these sort of supernatural elements to it, but I think it kind of gets this sort of almost like Buddhist perspective on, multiple realities and, the paths not taken in life that I think is very poignant. And it's, just incredible to see Ke Kwan, probably butchered the pronunciation of that, but him just getting back into movies, like that was really cool, and I think a really good feel.
Very, you got to give it this. It is capital O original. It is one of the most original movies you'll ever see.
Particularly for a theme or a plot device that felt completely played out.
Yeah.
That was the reason we didn't see it originally, because we're just like, I can't do another multiverse
There
movie.
was a theater near us, and it had Everything Everywhere All at Once and Doctor Strange as the only two movies playing. I think the movie's called Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. It's like, this theater is exclusively playing multiverse movies, so I think we kind of boycotted. But glad I saw it. It was a good film.
Yes.
The Banshees of Inisherin, a Martin McDonagh film. This is just a pretty simple study of male friendships. There's, Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell are the main characters. Brendan Gleeson decides he wants to stop being friends with Colin Farrell. And there's a lot of these sort of political and religious undertones about long-standing conflicts. I think it sort of takes place during the Irish Civil War.
Yeah, Irish and North Irish Catholic Protestant allegory for that.
So, it's typical Martin McDonagh, really sharp dialogue, a little bit of violence. Barry Keoghan plays a pretty quirky, quasi-mentally disabled guy, but he gives a good performance in it as well.
It is also funny to see Colin Farrell as he's like a dullard, I guess would be the way that he's just this like super handsome, dashing, eloquent guy, and he's just playing a dullard exceptionally well. And boy, the stakes of it, like when Gleeson actually, does what he threatens to do to himself.
No, for sure. It's a very linear, very escalating, very interesting.
But I think that leads to the allegorical thing is when he's literally trying to hurt Colin Farrell and instead just hurts himself, and perhaps there's a lesson there.
There's that old saying about when you hold a grudge, it's like drinking poison and expecting it to kill the other guy.
Wow.
That's why I try not to hold grudges against you, buddy. I try.
You try.
Another acclaimed film.
I think you drink a little poison.
I drink a little poison once in a while. Another acclaimed film, Elvis. We spent a good amount of time talking about this in episode 2, so if you'd like to go back and hear us talk about Baz Luhrmann's Elvis, go back to episode 2 of the Flynn Brothers podcast. There was also The Fabelmans, Tar. There was Women Talking, Triangle of Sadness. This was a highly acclaimed film, sort of a social satire about the haves and the have-nots. I found it a little overrated. It was a little long. I think it was kind of 2.5 hours or so, and it kind of sold itself as just this very rollicking, hilarious skewering of the wealthy class, and I don't know, it just didn't quite land for me.
I think the skewering of the wealthy class is a popular theme that people want to seem on board with, so you don't want to critique the movie and people are like, wait a second, are you in favor of the wealthy class?
Yeah. You don't want to eat the rich, huh? Another acclaimed film, The Whale. Fabulous performance by Brendan Fraser, won the Oscar. Really incredible, stirring ending as well. Difficult film to watch. Who is the director? I'm spacing on his name. Aronofsky. Sorry, Darren Aronofsky directs it, and he does a very tight, claustrophobic aspect ratio, which really heightens the size of the Brendan Fraser character. And having just read and finished Moby Dick, I look back at the film and have some more understandings of some of the subliminal themes it's playing with in that. But yeah, very, very good movie. A vehicle, a Brendan Fraser vehicle. This is a movie you would call a vehicle, wouldn't you?
A classic one-hander, or one guy using two hands to eat a meatball sub.
Right.
He is, though, I think what's really incredible about it is how quickly the movie flip-flops between tragedy and comedy, and just like is dancing on that knife's edge the whole time. Because there is something extremely sad and also extremely funny about a dude crushing a Three Musketeers bar as fast as he possibly can.
Yeah, well, it gave me some ideas after the movie. Stopped by the liquor store, got a Three Musketeers bar. We also had Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, really wonderful stop motion film. Kind of went under the radar. I think just went straight to Netflix sort of during the holiday season, but really, really good stop motion film.
Yeah, Guillermo del Toro lands another blow against fascists and also delves into a magical world as well, which, whenever he's working in that. And I think the other thing, too, with the stop motion, as we talked about on another part, Guillermo del Toro is just the master of textures, and you just let him have complete control over every single thing that's in the frame. And, you just really get transported.
There was the very polarizing Babylon, and there was also Nope, Jordan Peele's Nope. We really enjoyed this movie. Didn't absolutely love it as much as his first two. What we really loved was the subplot with Gordy the chimp, which was based on real life events. Basically, this TV chimp goes crazy live on air and attacks all his co-stars. And there's sort of this mirror to the events of the film about blurring that line between man and nature. And, you see what he's doing intellectually. I don't know how fun and enjoyable to watch it is. And I remember when we watched it, you enjoyed the Keke Palmer performance, but felt kind of there was a missed opportunity with it.
Yeah, I think that it aims to be a new, just bold, original type of movie. And so there really is no romance angle to the story at all. It's a brother and sister pairing. And I do just think, as a guy who likes old school movies, it would have been interesting to me if the Kaluuya Keke Palmer was sort of either some sort of a romantic relationship. They don't need to be a happy romantic couple. Right. They don't even necessarily need to fall in love, be a romantic comedy, but just like there was a little bit of that tension missing. I think it's just inherently more interesting to have some sort of a romantic relationship as opposed to maybe a sibling relationship.
Yeah, I think you're probably right on that. All right, popular films from 2022. We had the film that saved cinema as we know it, Top Gun Maverick. To be honest, it is an all-time movie to see on the big screen. Tom Cruise is electric. Is the movie that made me fall in love with Glenn Powell and his devilish charm. And Miles Teller, welcome back. He was, people didn't like him for a few years. Then he was back in this, and he's wonderful. And yeah, man, capital A American movie, great popcorn flick, really, really great.
You get John Hamm as a stern Army guy or Air Force guy. Yeah, I think Cruise, man. It is incredible the longevity that he has been able to have to dip back into this movie too and be in as good a shape as anyone out there. Yeah. I mean, it must have been like that movie must have been like what being on the Olympic team is like for basketball players. And you see Cruz being Kobe. It's like Miles Teller,
Glenn Powell.
Yeah. You want to be the best. This is what it takes.
It's like, they're like showing up to set, the weight room on set, and Cruz has already been there for an hour.
I've already done 3 takes, boys.
Another popular film, The Batman with Robert Pattinson. Really great film. I think we saw it a couple times in theaters as Batman fans. We really, really loved it. I'm sure we'll go into it longer on our Batman-specific podcast that is undoubtedly coming at some point. And I think our biggest note is it's a great film, very atmospheric, but long. It's a long movie. I think it's nearly 3 hours.
Absolutely. You could accuse it of scaring the hose, I would say, for a Pattinson picture. But the realization of Batman as basically developmentally disabled / goth is, I think, probably one of the truest depictions of what Bruce Wayne, if you were to put him in reality, would be like.
100%. Last popular film, Avatar: The Way of Water. I felt the same way about this film as I did with the first Avatar. Awesome to see in theaters. No real desire to rewatch it. If I ever did have a desire to rewatch it, I'd only want to do it on the big screen. I just feel like without the goggles, without the big screen, kind of what's the point of an Avatar movie?
Yeah, absolutely. But Jimmy Cameron was cooking underwater for sure.
Yeah, Jimmy Cameron. You're on the nickname basis with him, are you? All right, Flynn Brothers favorites. We got Blonde, Andrew Dominik's Blonde. This was the sort of fictionalized biopic of Marilyn Monroe. I, like many viewers, found the film a bit lurid. You, though, enjoyed Blonde quite a bit. Talk to me about what you found to like about Blonde.
I think it is lurid. I think it is arguably fairly tasteless. I think it takes a lot of liberties with her life and doesn't really, paint her in the best light possible. I think the Ana de Armas performance is pretty underrated. You would think it wouldn't work just because of her accent and just the fact that they don't really occupy the same place in your brain, Ana de Armas and Marilyn Monroe. But what the movie makes the point of is that Marilyn Monroe is a character that Norma Jean is playing. And so to have Ana de Armas, who is not really naturally Marilyn Monroe-esque, playing this character, I think you kind of get that extra added level. And I would say in terms of its success as a movie, it seeks to de-glamorize Marilyn Monroe. And in the Halloween following this film, nobody dressed up as Marilyn Monroe.
That's true. Yeah, the idea of dressing up like Marilyn Monroe was like, I saw Blonde. I don't know how tasteful that would be. Another Flynn Brothers favorite, RRR, which I believe won Best Original Song at the Oscars. It was a film out of India. This has some of the most evil white imperialists you will ever see in a movie. There's a scene where a British imperialist goes into a village and wants to essentially purchase an Indian girl to work in his house, and he flicks a coin on the ground and just takes her away. And it is just, there are just some scenes in it where it's like, boy, those white British imperialists are evil, and man, those Indian dudes are really kicking some ass. It's awesome.
Yeah, they're as evil as it gets, but the two leads in that film make leading men in America look talentless and weak. I mean, these guys are ripped. They're doing their own stunt, seemingly, like flying through the air. They're singing, they're dancing, they're delivering lines with such machismo.
Forget triple threats. These guys are like quintuple threats. It's unbelievable how talented.
It's just for a movie that is a 3-hour foreign film that I think has negative associations in the American. This is a joyride, a roller coaster.
Yeah, that's awesome. Another Flynn Brothers favorite, X. I think it's T or Ty West's. This is a film that became a trilogy. This first one, I would say, is the best of all of them. It involves a group of friends in the 70s who are going to shoot a pornographic film, and they have rented basically a barn on the ranch of this old scary couple, and I think it's in Texas, and mayhem ensues, and it's just a wonderful horror film. Some great sequences, some great performances. Mia Goth in particular is really great in this film.
Yeah, an early Jenna Ortega. Kid Cudi, probably in his best work, which, it's not saying a ton, but it's...
he's solid.
He's solid. Definitely fulfills the role. Interesting sort of discussions of jealousy, and in terms of like what you're okay with your partner doing on camera, obviously escalated to the highest possible level, but pretty interesting movie with some meat on the bone other than the, inevitable bloodshed.
Another Flynn Brothers favorite, Hustle. This is the perfect middle of the Venn diagram between two of our interests, Adam Sandler and basketball. Adam Sandler plays a basketball scout in this movie, and he's really great in it. Really cool movie. This was one I think we forgot to mention. Sandler, his last 5-6 years, we've talked about how wonderful this run has been. This is another entry in the iconic Adam Sandler run of the last few years.
Absolutely. You got Anthony Edwards becomes a full-blown movie star, and then I would say he literally, I feel like, almost could act. Like,
stop playing basketball now and just act.
And then I think the other thing that's great about it is you get Queen Latifah as Adam Sandler's wife, and awesome. I bought it.
It was awesome. It was awesome. All right, last Flynn Brothers favorite for the year, we have Barbarian. This is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. It's from director Zach Kreger, who also wrote it. He's from the sketch comedy team Whitest Kids You Know, and what he does in this film is so brilliant. He takes kind of this sketch comedy approach to horror where there's definitive escalations, there's definitive surprises. He toes the line between horror and comedy, which are, both related to surprise. If something surprises you, it can be funny. If something surprises you, it can be scary. And Bill Skarsgård plays a very great against type role in this film. And yeah, man, as soon as I saw it, I don't usually see a lot of horror movies, but as soon as I saw it, it just went to the very top of my horror list.
Yes, it sets you up to think that it's one movie, particularly with the Skarsgård casting. You're like, uh-oh, look out for this guy. Yeah. And it takes a turn you could not possibly see coming. I don't believe that I'm spoiling anything. We'll maybe say off, but and then there is a cut in the middle of the film.
The movie starts over about a half hour.
Yeah,
into it,
and you get a
awesome.
Justin Long performance where he's really deploying all of the winsomeness that made him a darling of the early 2000s.
As well as the sleaziness he's aged into.
Right, yeah. It's just like a kind of a perfect character for him. And yeah, just kind of like one of those movies that it's not going for laughs, it's going for gasps.
Yeah,
and you're gasping all the way through.
It achieves both, though.
That's true.
A very good movie year. Love Barbarian, love Top Gun Maverick, but I don't know if we can quite nominate this one.
Doesn't have the top level films that you'd like to see from the great movie years.
Agreed. All right, we'll be right back. We're back. Okay, the year 2023, the Barbenheimer year. The acclaimed films, of course. There could only be one between Barbie and Oppenheimer was Best Picture. First time I saw it, wasn't convinced. Second time I saw it, I thought to myself, this is one of the great, important American films of the 21st century.
100%. I think it really captures a feature of American history that people don't really understand, how we built this bomb. It's so impressive, and yet at the same time, is starting a chain reaction that is going to lead to all of our ultimate demises, is essentially the point that the movie makes. Cillian Murphy, just like, good God, is he really just in the skin of Oppie?
A lot of dialogue he had to memorize too, man. It's a long movie, and he's in every scene, and he's doing most of the talking.
Yeah,
and he's incredible.
The multiple timelines, I think, is a little bit hard to follow the first time around, but it does make sense as a narrative and structural choice.
It demands a second viewing, but you're also demanding a cumulative 6+ hours of your audience. So I get if people saw it once and were like, I had more fun at Barbie. Like, I totally think that's a valid approach.
Yes, I would rank my movie viewing experiences of Oppenheimer the second time, Barbie the first time, Oppenheimer the first time. Like, I enjoyed Barbie a lot more the first time around. But man, the part that I think really stands out, particularly the first time you watch it, is Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, he's great immediately. Just a very restrained, very good performance. It is very different from the work he was doing in Marvel, where it's a lot of like machine gun dialogue, rat-tat-tat-tat, charisma, being cool Tony Stark. He's an old man, and he's got a stick up his ass, and he's jealous and very human. And yeah, he deserved the Oscar. He's really phenomenal.
It's a little bit sad too, seeing like the movie, he's gone back into the Marvel universe as Doctor Doom. You sort of thought he was going to transition into this later part of his career, where I'd make a comparison to a Russell Westbrook type.
Right.
Like, he used to lead the team, and the team was good when he was leading it, and it's like, the teams are starting to get bad. Now he's on the Nuggets in the sixth man role, and that's essentially what Downey Jr. is in this. He's the sixth man of this movie, and you're just like, man, he's getting points. Boy, that's a solid 20 minutes. And now he's like, all right, he's going back to the Wizards.
Don't be number one on the Wizards. Stay on the Nuggets. Yeah, that's funny. All right, Barbie, another great movie. We had an interesting conversation when we came out of this movie. I think one of the big takeaways from this film is the America Ferrera speech toward the end of the film, where she's kind of given Barbie the pep talk about how difficult it is to be a woman, and the challenges women face, and it's this real rallying cry of a scene. And I think we went and saw the movie. It was a few guys and a few gals, and of course the gals loved it, and some of the guys were kind of grinning at each other and stuff. And really, how I've figured it out is, I think you just have to equate this scene is for women what the Braveheart Mel Gibson speech is for men. And it's just like there are, this speech in Barbie plays to femininity, the speech in Braveheart plays to masculinity, and it's playing to two very different things at very different times. And I don't think Barbie's a perfect movie. I think a lot of the stuff with the Rhea Perlman character, the Ruth Handler, the Barbie creator, and at the very end they go off to heaven and have this weird humanistic philosophical conversation. It just didn't quite land. But when it's skewering feminism and the patriarchy a little more broadly. A lot of the Ryan Gosling stuff is super funny. He's really come along as a comedic actor, and Margot's great at the center of this movie. But yeah, it's not a perfect movie, but still a very, very good movie, and especially good on first watch.
Yeah, I think the America Ferrera speech, again, I was thinking it was a little bit corny, and then I looked to my right, and there was a woman about my age, maybe a little bit older, crying.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I think if you watched me watching Mel Gibson scream freedom and I'd be tears down my eyes and somebody would be rolling their eye at me. One thing that I did think was kind of funny about Barbie was obviously Margot just perfect. I don't think there ever has been a person who's more perfect for a role than she was to play Barbie. And just imbued it with a lot of intelligence and depth that I don't think anybody really was expecting from it. It really kind of revitalized femininity in a girly way. You don't have to, you can be everything. You can have all of these different things. And Barbie, who I think had been sort of cast aside by more modern feminist thought as being sort of reductive and all this sort of stuff, people are like, you know what? No, we can claim this too and have it. I did think one thing that wasn't a very funny part. The thing that I thought was funny was how much people were like, you know what's great about Barbie? The dudes. The dudes are so good in Barbie. Michael Cera and Ryan Gosling. But they really give a nice kind of counterbalance of comedy, and it's also, I think, cool, probably particularly for a female viewer, for this movie is just so much more from the female point of view, obviously, because of it's directed by Greta Gerwig, and men are definitely peripheral characters in it to a large extent. But boy, Gosling, when he first learns about how dudes rock
and horses. And It's last note, just great visual style, great production design, kind of gives you that old Hollywood Singing in the Rain sort of feel. Another film from the year, American Fiction. There was also, out of France, Anatomy of a Fall. This was one of our favorite films of the year. Really brilliant, very haunting ending. It's about this woman who's accused of killing her husband. Spoiler alert, they don't give you a very definitive answer. One of the most shocking things about this film is the very beginning of the movie, there is an instrumental version of 50 Cent's PIMP that plays. And I literally remember watching it, and the opening credits are going, it's kind of, movie's fading in. And I was like, am I watching the right movie? Is it possible that a movie in France in 2023 could be having PIMP at the beginning? I was like, there's no way. Am I watching Get Rich or Die Trying? It was just so crazy. But the song is used very evocatively, almost hauntingly in the film. And then I remember one of your favorite films, there's an incredible about 10-minute flashback scene between the wife and husband that you really enjoyed.
Yeah, I cannot stand your ice. It's just it's such an interesting thing too because when you're in a relationship or you're in any sort of situation, you're experiencing things, but then when you put that in a courtroom setting and you have to stipulate everything, and once you sort of start putting life down in writing, something is lost. As precise as you can be with language, whenever you put down a word to describe something, you have immediately lost something that ineffably that it was.
Another fascinating part of this film is just the machinations of the French judicial system.
Totally.
Just very fascinating. Very different from America. Very, very fascinating.
Bit more loose.
It's pretty loose. Yeah. They're dressed a little more pompously, but boy, it's a little fast and loose with the rules.
There's a lot of stuff that, would get you held in contempt of court that the French are doing, no problem.
Another great acclaimed film, The Holdovers. This was Paul Giamatti and Alexander Payne reuniting after Sideways. Paul Giamatti gives a really incredible performance in this movie. His character has a lazy eye, and the performance is so convincing that I remember when we were watching it, we asked each other, did Paul Giamatti, has he always had a lazy eye? And we just never noticed. But he's this great kind of sad sack of a character. Alexander Payne gives it a great visual style. It's it takes place at this boarding school over the holidays, and Giamatti, just more strong work from one of our favorite actors.
Yeah, he's one of the best, and this is a perfect role for him.
Next acclaimed film, Killers of the Flower Moon. Now, this is a very brilliant film. It's a very punishing film. It's a very long film. I would go out on a limb and say it's the definitive cinematic work about the evils white American settlers have perpetrated upon Native Americans. I think that's a pretty fair statement to make. Wouldn't you say so?
Yeah, I'd say it takes a true story and then also makes that an allegory for the larger situation of evil and deprivation and murder and all of that.
And, movies have never been this ambitious in terms of this theme. I think this was one movie that if it was going to accomplish something, it was going to accomplish that. I think it falls apart a little bit in sort of the final third of the film when Leo is busted and Jesse Plemons is the detective and he comes in, and it just kind of plays out like a lot of the Scorsese films we've seen like over the last 20, 30 years, where it's just like bad guy gets busted and then he's kind of getting questioned the last third of the film. And yeah, it to me didn't add too much, like too many new things from that perspective. So the end of the film, in an already long film, felt especially long. And, a lot of the evils that are being perpetrated in the film, Robert De Niro's kind of the puppet master and Leo's kind of aiding him in how they're screwing over the native people.
And murdering them.
Yes. And they themselves are not personally committing these acts of evil. So dramatically, there's this sense of, okay, like I know these are the bad guys, but other guys are doing their bidding. So as the viewer, you're just not like, you still dislike the De Niro and DiCaprio characters, but it's like it would be a little more effective if they were perhaps a little more active on screen. So dramatically, there's some elements where intellectually the film works very well, but dramatically and just on a second-to-second basis, it perhaps is not as captivating as you'd want it to be.
Yeah, De Niro's basically playing like Orville Redenbacher.
He's got the little glasses.
He's extremely subdued in it, to the point where it's like, I know this is the bad guy the whole movie, but he just never really reveals that to you. And then I think the other tough part is that you've got Leo as the main character, and Leo, frankly, plays a bit of a moron.
Yes.
It's tough to build a 3-hour movie around a dumb character.
You don't want to hang out with a moron for 3 hours, typically. Yeah.
And I think that this movie went through some rewrites and sort of during COVID, and I think it is really incredible the way that it represents the Osage perspective and really, doesn't sideline the Native American peoples in this movie the way that certain movies maybe would have done in the past. However, there is another movie there I think that Scorsese could have made where let's flop Plemons and DiCaprio and make it about 2 hours long, and about 20 minutes into the movie DiCaprio shows up as the he's the main character and he's the butt kicking sheriff, and it's like, I hear you're killing Osage around here.
Right. So the way the film was originally conceived was DiCaprio was going to play the Jesse Plemons character, who's I think like an FBI agent who comes to investigate the murders. And yeah, the Jesse Plemons character in the final film doesn't show up till over 2 hours into the movie, if not more. And so yeah, it's that would have been a very, like, the version you're talking about would have been a very Hollywoodified version of it, and probably would have been a little more captivating. But I think Scorsese, in consulting with the Osage, decided, well, this maybe isn't the most reverent portrayal, and I think opted for a more reverent portrayal, perhaps at the cost of it being more dramatically interesting.
Yeah. And I think, with something that's so tender and, tough to even just think about and remember and, know as a reality, it's not something you want to be as so fast and loose, perhaps, with the facts.
Another Acclaimed film was Maestro, the Bradley Cooper long gestating work. Boy, we really wanted to love this movie. We love Brad Cooper, and we watched it with the whole family over the holidays, and we made it halfway through, and everyone looked at each other, and everyone asked, do you want to keep watching? And nobody said yes, and we turned it off. I felt really bad, man. I felt really bad.
It's the worst I've ever felt turning off a person's movie. It was like walking out of a school play for somebody who, and it's like, my son, he also directed this.
Oh,
or whatever.
yeah.
It's like your neighbor or something. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, I can't do it. His character's weird. The relationship, or his portrayal of the character is weird. The relationship that he has with his wife is, you just don't really ever buy that they were in love.
Yeah, the movie jumps a little all over the place. It's a little messy. I don't know, sort of like Killers of the Flower Moon, how captivating it is on a second-to-second basis. It's beautifully shot. Some of the acting is strong. Brad Cooper smokes a lot of cigarettes, but yeah, it just, when 5-6 people are sitting around and everyone decides to bail out, it's not always the best thing in the world.
Went in with the best intentions, wanted it to be great.
Oh, yeah. Another acclaimed film, Past Lives. There was also Poor Things. Emma Stone won the Oscar. I, thought the woman in Anatomy of a Fall maybe should have deserved it, but Emma Stone gave a big, showy performance in Poor Things, and I think she's quite good in it. I'm not the biggest Yorgos Lanthimos fan, and I personally found the film a little overlong and a little overrated. There are elements that are very funny. There are elements that are very original, but just kind of wasn't for me.
No, me either. I actually didn't make it as far as you did. I did another Maestro, and I turned it off halfway through.
This was the year of bailing out of movies that were nominated. Another acclaimed film, The Zone of Interest. You mentioned this phrase earlier, the banality of evil. This film totally captures the banality of evil. It's about a family of Nazis trying to build their dream home next to a concentration camp, and it's a very dark film, and the ending is unbelievably stunning. There is this scene where the main character, this Nazi, is walking down the stairs, and he gags as if he has to throw up, and then he kind of puts his fist up to his mouth and then kind of swallows it back down. Basically this evil that's within him is trying to be expelled, and he has to just kind of force it back down. It's sort of a good allegory for what you are if you're a Nazi. And in the midst of this scene, there's this flash forward to current day where people are essentially like cleaning Auschwitz or vacuuming the concentration
dust,
camp,
which is obviously a callback to the ovens. And I think what it really accomplishes well is this movie doesn't hit you over the head with the brutality and the sort of imagery that we've seen in other Holocaust movies, but the echoes of those movies and the knowledge that you have, if you've ever been to a Holocaust museum or anything like that, just living with these people. And you're also just like, you're not meant to root for these characters. The director really keeps them at an arm's length. Perhaps you can sympathize occasionally, but you're also just like, anything that these characters want or feel or are is just pales in comparison with the evil that they are committing.
Another acclaimed film, The Color Purple, the musical. And then there was Dream Scenario with Nicolas Cage. He's really great in this, wears a bald cap. Really good performance.
Fascinating about going viral. I don't know if it's necessarily a one-to-one thing that you want to get, but Cage just is unreal as an actor, and you just sort of wish there was a little indie movie where he could just really let it rip every year.
Yeah.
We'd
like to see a Dream Scenario every year with Cage. Why not? Popular films from 2023. We had the Super Mario Brothers movie. We had movie star Timothy Chalamet as Willy Wonka in Wonka. We had Fast X, the 10th Fast and Furious movie. We saw this in the theaters and really enjoyed this one. Jason Momoa is the villain, and he does this brilliant choice as the villain where he plays his character very effeminately. I think he has like painted fingernails and
flowy pants,
and he's
sandals.
He kind of flounces around at times, and it's such a brilliant performance because it's against the backdrop of Vin Diesel and his cohort of super masculine, super machismo-y dudes, and it's just a wonderful contrast and lends the movie some great conflict. And apparently, like, Vin Diesel, I think, got kind of annoyed at Jason Momoa on set, and you can feel it in the movie. You can definitely feel Vin is getting annoyed, feeling like Jason Momoa's performance is too big at times, and it really serves the movie well.
I think sometimes Fast and Furious movies can be accused of feeling like they're going through the motions, and Momoa just throws a wrench into, torturing a metaphor here, into the V8 Hemi engine that is this franchise, and just forces people to give more interesting performances against him. You can totally feel that undercurrent. And then the other thing that allows this sort of flamboyant performance to work is that Momoa is a bigger and stronger dude than anybody on Vin's crew.
Right.
So it just
most handsome too, I dare say.
Wow,
handsome, I dare say.
Right.
Now
we'll get into that later.
Yeah, we'll explore that at some point. Another popular film, Taylor Swift, The Eras Tour. There were a lot of 3-hour movies that came out this year. This one had me on the edge of my seat, man. I absolutely loved it. I don't know what to say. I saw it with my girlfriend in a mostly empty theater. There were only about 2 other women. I was the only dude there. But I loved it, man. She, famously, to prepare for the tour, would sing all her songs while running on the treadmill. And she's just in incredible shape. It's like seeing the performance of a great athlete in a big game. And Yeah, it's wonderful, man. As someone who, was moderately interested in her music, once this Eras tour came around, I started kind of diving into her albums and, really enjoy a handful of them. And hats off, man. She deserves all the recognition and adulation. It's a pretty awesome movie, I got to say.
A physical and artistic feat that has perhaps never been equaled. I mean, it just won the respect of basically everybody in America.
Yeah, you just throw up your hands at a certain
Stephen
point.
A. Smith was bowing down to her.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. That's true. Last popular film, Saltburn. Did not see, but I know there's a scene where a fella drinks another fella's bathwater. All right, Flynn Brothers favorites. We got May December with Natalie Portman and Julianne Moore. I think Todd Haynes directed it. This is cringe/dark comedy at its absolute best. It kind of is a play on the Mary Kay Letourneau relationship with her student, and Natalie Portman is basically this woman studying her to play her in a film. And man, it's kind of like The Kindergarten Teacher, which we mentioned earlier in this series, and just very uncomfortable at times, very, very funny at times, very, very dark, but the acting is just sensational.
Oh, yeah. It's a total, fencing duel between Julianne Moore and Natalie Portman. I mean, they're both just really excellently cast. Julianne Moore has a lisp in it. There's this sequence where Natalie Portman visits the pet store in which the two of them worked, Julianne Moore and the stud
Charles
man,
Melton, who plays, who was her former student. Yeah.
Who's, as strapping and good looking as an actor as it gets, and put on a nice gut to sort of diminish
I love
that.
when a stud puts on a gut. It makes me feel better,
And Portman is just walking behind the aquariums, and the lighting is and it's just this you can just and this is wrong to say perhaps, but you can see Portman I get it. I see why this happens.
As an actress, she's trying to really understand who she's studying, and it's Natalie Portman is quite villainous in this film, surprisingly so. She's quite villainous, but yeah, man, it's a hell of a two-hander. Another Flynn Brothers favorite, Godzilla -1. This is far and away the best Godzilla movie I've ever seen. I can't even think of one that would be in second place. It's a Japanese film, and I think won maybe a special effects Oscar or something like that. But dude, it's just awesome. I think the great thing it does is it scales down from these American Godzilla movies where Godzilla shoots blue volcanic lightning, nuclear lava crap out of his mouth, and can do all this crazy stuff, and there's all these Godzilla fights. And this movie just was a master of pacing, and I think it kind of takes place post World War II, so there's some interesting commentary from the Japanese perspective, and really, really great Godzilla movie.
The main character is a kamikaze pilot who decides not to kamikaze, essentially, which is just, boy, that is loaded and just so interesting. Godzilla gets bigger as the movie goes along. He starts out kind of small and then just gets absolutely gigantic. To me, it almost reminds me of, because we watched a lot of Godzilla movies growing up, and they're not supposed to be high art necessarily. The idea is so good and all of that, and then they got blockbusterized, and some of the moments in the more American Godzillas, there's some cool things that happen in them, but in terms of a cohesive, complete movie, it's kind of like the way that Kill Bill takes all of the best parts of kung fu movies and puts them together into sort of one coherent vision. I feel like Godzilla -1 does that.
We really enjoyed Megan, fun kind of comedy horror film. There was also Beau is Afraid from Ari Aster. The first half of this film is one of the most brilliant films we have ever seen.
Yeah.
The second half, after it passed the halfway point, I think within 10 minutes, there's a scene where Beau, played by Joaquin Phoenix, goes into the forest, and I was captivated the whole first half of the movie. He goes into the forest. 10 minutes later, I fell asleep.
Yeah.
After an hour and a half of me thinking, this is one of the greatest movies I've ever seen, I fell asleep. And the rest of the movie is pretty scattered and pretty unclear. And, there's some kind of shock gags, but, I don't know, man. It was kind of disappointing after the first half being so brilliant. The second half,
the second half is just a little too personal, perhaps, for me to really get into.
In all Ari Aster's movies, there seems to be a tortured dynamic he perhaps has with his mother in his personal life, and if that's not the case, then his films make it appear that way and are thus very uncomfortable.
But I do think the first half is one of the best conditions of like feeling anxious or paranoid rendered in a comedic way. Like it is just outrageously funny, and Joaquin is really, really good in it. And he's, doing the thing the whole movie, but the first half, I think he's just exceptional.
There was also Air, the movie about pitching the Air Jordan to Michael Jordan with Ben Affleck and Matt Damon and Chris Tucker. Really good welcome back performance from Chris Tucker.
And Viola Davis.
Oh, yeah, as Jordan's mom.
Who
she's
really
great.
gives it the gravitas that it needs. And man, when Damon is telling Michael Jordan he's going to be the best of all time, you're
getting misty.
I'm getting misty.
Another great favorite. They cloned Tyrone. This one flew under the radar. It had John Boyega, and Jamie Foxx gives a really, really good performance in this movie. Sort of a send-up, or just kind of face value, a blaxploitation movie, and very fun social commentary, some good laughs. Jamie Foxx particularly responsible for those. And yeah, anything else on They Cloned Tyrone?
I just love seeing Fox in movies, man.
He's awesome. You are so not invited to my bar mitzvah. It might have been bat mitzvah. Man, did I write bar on accident? I think it's from the perspective of a girl, and girls usually have the bat mitzvahs. I think. Give it a check. Another film in the Adam Sandler 5-6 year run. He gives a great supporting role in this. His daughter's the main character. Very fun coming of age movie.
It is a bat mitzvah.
Bat mitzvah. I wrote it down wrong. Sorry about that.
It's almost though like a victory lap for the Sandman.
Yes.
He's got his kids in this.
He's like, even my kids make great movies.
And they do. It's a great movie.
The last one, A Haunting in Venice, based on whose book?
Agatha Christie.
Oh, you're a huge fan.
Although, what's interesting about this, I've read the book, the Hercule Poirot adventure, upon which this movie is supposedly based. It is, frankly, not really based on the book. The story is quite different. The whole demon possession thing doesn't really enter into it, which is a really interesting feature of this. I think Brana is a weird choice to play Poirot because he's just kind of has this charisma about him.
That Poirot should not have.
Yes, it's a sexual charisma that Poirot possesses, a artistic, perhaps intellectual charisma, but he is a weird little egg-shaped man with wax mustaches who loves sweet treats and solving crimes. That is not what Kenneth Branagh plays. Kenneth Branagh kind of plays an ass kicker, crazy mustache, but it works. It's not really your Agatha Christie traditional Poirot, but
Branagh had made Murder on the Orient Express and then Death on the Nile, and then this was kind of the third time's the charm. The first two he kind of quite didn't nail, but this one was a solid movie.
I think he stuck too much to the source material, if I may.
Interesting.
Also, with Murder on the Orient Express, you're trying to top a original that is untoppable.
Yeah, stack cast in the original. 2023, speaking of stacked, it is incredibly stacked. I think absolutely, positively, 100% we can nominate this year to take on 2019 later on.
Yeah, really a movie that a year that made movies feel like they were back.
Absolutely. All right, moving on. 2024. So we are taping before the Oscars, so we don't know the results. We don't know who's going to win Best Picture. Do you have a guess as to who's going to win Best Picture, and then the audience can find out a month later after they've already learned?
Man, I do not know. I would say my Best Picture of the year was The Substance.
Yeah, I think they're going to vote for The Brutalist. So we'll pretend Brutalist won Best Picture. We'll talk about it first. The Brutalist, to me, this is like Beau is Afraid. It's another classic case of first half, second half, where I really enjoyed the first half of the film. The second half, I did not enjoy as much. There's a particularly vile scene between Guy Pearce, who does give a good performance, but there's a very vile scene of Guy Pearce violating Adrian Brody that just kind of comes out of nowhere and feels very unearned, and people I've talked to about it are kind of perplexed at the inclusion of the scene in the film. And I had some qualms with the ending, and it's beautifully shot. The score is magnificent. Adrian Brody's great. The performances are great. But I don't know. Let me down a little the second half after intermission. Another acclaimed film. We got A Complete Unknown, the Bob Dylan film. Timothée Chalamet, this one really had the odds stacked against him, wouldn't you say?
It's a type of movie that people think has been done to death. It's a subject who, as the title makes clear, is a complete unknown, a man who cannot be known and refuses knowledge of himself, and a movie that basically hinges on you being like, wow, this guy's a genius.
Yes, and you it's such a celebration of Bob Dylan's songs and particularly his lyrics. And in contrast to James Mangold's other biopic, Walk the Line, which was very much Johnny Cash's whole life and the ups and downs and stuff, this one's very specific. It's a pretty contained, sort of from Bob Dylan showing up in New York City to him going electric. So it's just a few years, and you know, it's got more music than your typical musical. I mean, this thing is stacked to the gills with Bob Dylan songs. It was one of my favorites of the year. I just really enjoy Bob Dylan, his music, and the time period. And Chalamet's incredible. Monica Barbaro's incredible. Ed Norton with the receding hairline, he's incredible. But yeah, man, just I would say for my money, if I had to buy the DVD for one movie this year, I think I might buy the DVD for A Complete Unknown.
Yeah, I think having Johnny Cash as a comedic element in the film is also funny. And there was a bit of discussion among like big Bob Dylan fans, and a lot of people were like, "Oh, I would not have chosen this era to make a movie about. Not this era. It's so well known." And it's like, yeah, that's why you make the move. Like, sure, we can do down the line Dylan in the 70s and 80s or whatever, but you need to establish before you go on to that stuff.
Another acclaimed film, Honora, Mikey Madison getting rave reviews, might win Best Actress. We'll see. We don't know yet. Conclave, we really enjoyed growing up Roman Catholic. A very subtle film, a very adult film. I found it virtually perfect in terms of the writing, the visual style, the performances, the twists. Lord, the twists.
Ooh, big twists. Must see for a thinking man's Catholic, I would say, akin to Silence. Really interesting, just the inner workings of the conclave and how these cardinals interact with each other, how political it is, and also just the ritual and ceremony is depicted in a way that I think is just spellbinding, almost like reminded me of Dune.
Yeah,
like
it's true. Yeah. It's true. Emilia Perez, another acclaimed film. There was The Substance, which you mentioned. This is the rare movie that, a lot of movies will try to make a statement, but really what they're doing is asking questions and trying to get the audience to think. Didn't you feel that this was a movie that actually came out and said some pretty definitive things?
Oh, yeah. It has teeth. It says that you can't steal youth for yourself. Everything has consequences. If you try to manipulate your face, you're losing these parts of your humanity. And I also think it's interesting that there is inside of all of us perhaps two people. There's perhaps you would call them weekday you and weekend you. You're just like, for weekend you, weekday you shows up after weekend you's had their run of the place, and you're just like, what were we thinking? The Margaret Qualley, control yourself. I think that is, even if you haven't gotten plastic surgery, it's just like really opens itself up to a lot of different interpretations.
Yeah. A Real Pain. There was also Nickel Boys, September 5th. I never saw it. I heard it was pretty good, though. And then Nosferatu. Is that Nosferatu?
I heard someone say Nosferatu, and I thought it was really pretentious, but then I've been finding myself saying it because I feel like it's right. Who knows?
Yeah, it was really good. Robert Eggers, they just announced he's going to do a werewolf movie after this, and I wonder if he's just going to become the monster guy now, where it's like, I did Dracula, I'm going to do a werewolf. Who knows what's next?
Guillermo beat him to Frankenstein.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Guillermo got in there. He felt Eggers' breath on the back of his neck, and he was like, I gotta charge forward. But yeah, Bill Skarsgård, man, he's the king of portraying villains. He's really wonderful as Count Orlok in this. Lily Rose Depp, really impressive performance in this film. Physically, she does some pretty incredible things. I really found her performance wonderful. This film doesn't have quite as jarring a first half, second half problem as The Brutalist and Beau is Afraid, but I definitely think first half of this movie, kind of before we meet Count Orlok, all the suspense is really strong. And then the Count Orlok performance is great, but the movie loses a little bit of steam just because the suspense bubble is popped.
Yeah, the mystique of Orlok is perhaps a bit more impressive than the mustachioed reality. The Idol really got just ripped to shreds critically.
Yeah.
I think it really helped Lily Rose Depp really stretch her legs, and I think ultimately might be a good thing, and I think you can kind of see it here, that she is just, there's nothing she won't do to get across what the Eggers is looking for.
Agreed. All right, popular films of 2024. We had Wicked, very fun movie. I had never seen the musical. It's definitely long. I think the musical generally runs like 2.5 hours with intermission, and part one was 2.5 hours. So they definitely are stretching some stuff. I've heard from people that they definitely added some stuff. Ariana Grande is very good. Cynthia Erivo, she's very good. The performances are good. It's got a little magic on it. If you're a fan of the Wizard of Oz and that whole mythology, it's fun. But yeah, I will see part two. But pretty long, man. These movies, they're getting long, aren't they?
They sure are, just like this podcast. I think that it's sort of an interesting movie in that there are some people who it's just like completely not for, and then other people who will be sobbing the entire time.
Right. Another popular film was Dune Part 2. I think, it just goes so hand in hand with part one. It feels to me, years from now when you go back and watch them, it'll kind of be like how, once a year, once every other year, you and I will do our Lord of the Rings day where we'll just watch all three in a day. And I kind of feel like Dune Part 1, Dune Part 2, and if, they do Dune Messiah, that'll be the same thing. It's just like, it's raining on Saturday. Let's just watch all the Dune movies.
Let's throw on the Dunes. Yeah, I mean, all the same things that we've said about Dune Part 1 apply here. Villeneuve, I mean, he just really has a great vision for this world. And this one, though, I think is really where Bardem shines at the Muad'Dib, and just like his fanaticism.
The clicking sounds.
Yeah.
He's doing. Yeah, no, man.
He's really having a lot of fun.
Yeah, he's great. Another popular film, Challengers. I think Zendaya's strongest work. Josh O'Connor gives a great villainous performance in this movie. If you're familiar with tennis and the machinations of tennis, there's some parts of this movie that are a little implausible. In particular, Zendaya's long, sort of model, gangly stature is not what you typically see for a tennis body and stuff. Not to objectify her, I'm just purely speaking from tennis terms.
Yeah,
but
athletic evaluation.
yeah, and of course she hurts her knee. She's too long. It's hard to move all that across the court. But it's a really great movie. There's the famous scene in the hotel room where it's the three of them doing intimate things, and Zendaya takes control, as it were, and just a really fun, funny, sexy.
She treats
movie.
those boys like a couple of Ken dolls.
yeah, and man, it's great. It's just I just had a smile on my face watching it. It's a fun movie.
It's really like kind of naughty and like just sort of like, ooh, look at this. We're gonna throw this at you, and I like that sort of attitude towards movies. Just it's pretty sexy and like unapologetically in that way, going for that type of thing. They're just he's trying to make people trying to talk about like just bodies and physicality, which I think we don't really think about. We're all trapped inside these flesh prisons, but there isn't too much discussion of them.
Another popular film was Baby Girl, with Nicole Kidman playing a woman who's having an affair with a younger fella who works at her office. I was really expecting just an old school, sexy, erotic thriller, and just, I don't know, man, wasn't very sexy. I don't know. Maybe I'm a perv. Maybe my standards are too high for sexy, erotic thrillers, but it was really billed as this, very intense, very erotic movie, and I got it. It's a fine movie, but I don't know. It wasn't very titillating, I felt.
Yeah, Nikki K, she's been doing a lot of she's the older lady with the younger man.
Which
in
great.
These types of movies.
Great,
Yeah,
I love
she's still
seeing
doing great. I mean, she's like, it is sort of interesting, not interesting, but it's cosmically interesting, I guess, that her and Cruz broke up, because they are really just each other's equal in terms of longevity and continuing to maintain a really high level of agelessness.
Another popular film, Deadpool and Wolverine. There was also Twisters, another great Glenn Powell role. And then there was Longlegs. It's from Oz Perkins, son of Anthony Perkins, famously portrayed Norman Bates in Psycho. There's a little trivia for you. Longlegs was really overhyped. It was, in the trailer, they had this title card that said the scariest movie of all time, or, some superlative like that. And, I'm not even a big horror guy, and I saw it. It's not super scary. The Cage performance is a little weird, even for him. And in horror movies, when it leans too far into the supernatural after living so much in reality, I feel a little let down. I just it always feels like kind of a cop-out when the movie goes kind of from reality into this supernatural world. So that was sort of some of my qualms with Lawn Legs, even though a lot of people loved it.
Yeah.
All right, Flynn Brothers favorites, really quickly. We had Unfrosted, the Jerry Seinfeld movie about the invention of the Pop-Tart. It's just a funny movie full of funny people.
The follow-up to the Bee movie. It is so funny. Gaffigan, Amy Schumer, and Jerry Seinfeld.
Melissa McCarthy. Yeah.
God.
It's like murderers, bro.
Loaded. And you can this is one of the movies where you can just feel how much fun everybody was
Yes.
having. You can almost feel they've all eaten big, high-level craft services lunches before they're serving.
Right.
Like, everyone just looks
Yeah.
comfortable and at ease. They're in this sort of Mad Men world.
Let's have good lunches and let's laugh a lot on set. That was the goal when they made it.
And 100% success.
Another favorite was Hitman. This was sort of the continuation of Glenn Powell's ascent. I think he and Richard Linklater co-wrote it and Linklater directed. Really fun, really sexy movie. This movie had some sexiness. I was satisfied with the sexiness here. But Glenn Powell, man, just super versatile, super leading man. Just, really winsome performance.
Yeah, a great movie in and of itself, and I think also an audition tape of Glenn Powell for just like, hey, make me the next movie star. What do you think? I'll be
what do you
like the
think?
next guy.
Yeah.
What do you
I
think?
can play
I can do
anytime.
anything. Yeah, like really funny, really, I think another really important thing for a movie star to have is we have to be able to style you as a sad sack.
Yes,
Like, and he is a sad sack at the beginning of the movie, and then by the end of it, he's, the guy on the yacht with Sydney Sweeney. Like, that's he's got all the different modes that he can do. And man, it was just funny. And like, what a great concept.
Really great. Another favorite, we got Juror Number 2. This movie was kind of buried from a theatrical release, but came out on Max. It just kind of reminds me of a rock-solid 90s movie. It's from Clint Eastwood, really just solid legal thriller, and I really enjoyed it. All right, last one. Flynn Brothers' favorite. It's a bit ironically slid it in here. It's Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis. Now, the one point I want to make about Megalopolis is this. I think this film is destined. I've looked into my crystal ball, and I think it is destined for sort of these midnight movie screenings, kind of like Rocky Horror Picture Show, where people come in costume, they're shouting the lines at the movie, they kind of like the movie, but the movie's campy and their enjoyment of it is ironic, but it's also a little bit face value. I really believe that is the destiny for this movie. There are some people who swear by it, who absolutely love it, but I think to enjoy this movie, there needs to either be something off about you or something off about your enjoyment of this movie, because I don't believe it to be conventionally a very good movie, but even though elements are entertaining. I think it is destined, though, for these midnight screenings.
It is chock full of baffling, bizarre choices from an acting perspective, from a directing perspective, from a writing perspective, from a costuming perspective. Everything about this movie is a vision, yet also it fails to kind of cohere. Like, it never really comes together. And I think you are completely right as to what you are saying. It needs to be laughed at. It needs to be over the top. People need to be talking during it. People should be getting up. They should be selling popcorn during it. Like, it's just a strange movie. And I think a very fitting movie to conclude our breakdowns of movies, because it's probably too long because the creators didn't know how to edit themselves.
Oh, yeah. Well, nothing we could relate to. Okay, 2024, very good year, but I definitely don't think it can hold a candle in our final tournament.
No, it's going to be fascinating to see how the Oscars turn out, but we don't know how they will turn out. Do you have a best picture?
I think I said Brutalist. I think
yeah.
that'll be it. But I do think Chalamet might sneak in there and win Best Actor. That's my prediction. You'll know by the time you listen to this, so we'll see if we're right or wrong. But one thing's for sure, we got to take a quick break. Okay, that concludes part 4. Tune in on Thursday for part 4.5 and the epic conclusion to the best movie year of the century. Please subscribe, comment, and leave a rating. Send questions, comments, or big idea suggestions to our business email, flynnbrospod@gmail.com. Thank you to our producer, Will Slade, and we'll see you next time on the Flynn Brothers Podcast. Buddy, take care.
Take care, buddy.